Welcome everybody to the Seen and Heard podcast, a conversational series. I have the great honour today of being joined by Paul Francis. Paul Francis is a UK-based shamanic practitioner, psychotherapist, author and teacher, best known as the founder of the Three Ravens College for Therapeutic Shamanism and Animism. He studied philosophy and social anthropology at Lancaster University before working in hospitals, teaching sign language and training in both complementary medicine and psychotherapy. In the early 1980s, he established his private practice, gradually weaving shamanic work into his therapeutic approach. In 2007, he formally founded the Three Ravens College, and in 2017, published the first in his acclaimed Therapeutic Shamanism series of books. Though now retired from one-to-one sessions, he continues to write and teach online, living a quiet and contemplative life in North Wales. Welcome to the podcast, Paul.
Oh, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to it.
Yeah, it's a huge pleasure for me, and grateful for you giving up your time. For me, when I came to your work, I don't like many of the things that have come in the last 4 years for me. I don't quite know how I found it. It found me really. And I was on Spotify listening to music, and I thought I just need to listen to something interesting, something different. And I found your first book, The Shamanic Journey, on Spotify. I prefer to listen and watch rather than read. I'm not a great reader. And it was beautifully read. And as soon as I heard it, I sort of knew I was home. It was a strange feeling.
That's lovely to hear. Yeah. Yeah.
So today we're going to explore some really interesting topics. For me, this was almost like a missing piece of a puzzle, connecting to therapeutic shamanism, to animism, to sort of our roots as human beings, when we came from, and how we are in the world, and what's happened really in particularly in the last sort of 6,000 years or so. But we're going to get into that today. But I always love to understand a little bit more about where my guest has come from and what brought them to the work they now do. Could you share a little bit about how things were for you in your early years?
Yeah, sure. Well, incredibly miserable. In common actually with a lot of people that end up being psychotherapists, I guess. You don't go into it if you've had a happy childhood generally. So yeah, very, very unhappy childhoods. There were a lot of mental health issues in my family. There were 6 of us, my mum, my dad, and us 4 children. I was the third child. And consequently, everybody was just very much in their kind of isolated bubble, trying to survive, really. And so nobody was emotionally available in the family at all. It was everybody was just incredibly lonely and isolated, dealing with their own issues, really. And on top of that, as is often the case in a dysfunctional family like that, somebody gets designated as being the scapegoat. The sort of all the stuff kind of gets dumped on them, all the unresolved psychic stuff, really. And that was me. So I was, right from birth, I was the outcast. It was made extremely clear to me that I wasn't at all welcome. Any attempt I made ever to join in was rebuffed. And so there was not much physical abuse, no sexual abuse, but quite a lot of emotional abuse. But the main thing was just profound neglect, emotionally, physically as well. Just real severe neglect and loneliness, really. So that was home life, and school was pretty much more the same, apart from a couple of times that I'll come to. But we moved a lot when I was a kid. I think we moved 7 times or something. So I think I went to 6 different schools, maybe 7. I've never counted them up. They varied. One was a fantastic tiny little village school with just an infant teacher and a junior teacher. That was amazing. Another time I spent a few years in a huge inner city, comprehensive, in a very, very socially deprived area. I mean, it was about as rough as you could get. And then the worst of all was 4 years in a very posh grammar school that really had pretensions of being a public school, really. It was a very old school. I think it had been founded in 15 something or other. And it was brutal. It was incredibly hierarchical and authoritarian. All the teachers kept a cane lying sort of on the front of their desk, apart from the woodwork teacher who'd been banned from caning because he'd drawn blood too many times. Disputes between pupils were settled in the boxing ring. When you were pushed into joining the Army Cadets or the Air Force Cadets, it was if you dropped house points, that was read out in front of the whole school, to show. I mean, it was just emotionally brutal, completely devoid of compassion and humanity, really. It was a day school mostly. There were some boarders. So although I never had the full boarding school experience, I think I got a lot of the experience of just how bad it could be. It was just awful place. Whilst at the same time, it was supposedly one of the 10 best grammars in the country at the time, and it sent people to Oxford and Cambridge. So it was kind of socially, it was really fated, but it was a terrible place. And there were two things that saved me. The first was just two teachers I had. Of all the, I don't know, I must have had, because we moved so much, I must have had hundreds of different teachers. But when I was 9, we moved to a little village school. And there was just this junior teacher, 15 pupils in the whole of the juniors. And Mrs. Hibbert, she, for the first 3 days, she literally just sat me on her knee. And 60 years later, and I'm still welling up in tears about it, she just cuddled me and just listened to me, really, and read me stories and got me to read her stories. But it was the first time ever anybody had actually made contact. So that was a really amazing experience. And I don't think it's any exaggeration to say that it saved my life, really. So, I mean, for any teachers listening to this, just remember the effect one teacher can make, really, to somebody. So, gosh, I've told that a lot, but it always amazes me how much it moves me still. So, I mean, bless her, Mrs. Hibbert. I was only with her for a year, but I think really interestingly, I was about 2 or 3 years behind educationally at that point. And within a year, I got to a year ahead, so I sat my 11 plus at 10. So I think it's a real illustration of how just kindness and compassion and trust and contact can help people blossom educationally as well. And how, well, interestingly, so I sat my 11 plus at 10 and then went to this brutal grammar. And we had exams at the end of every term. The first term I came third out of 30 pupils. By the last term of the first year, I was 27th. And that again just shows the effect, I think, of brutality on education as well. And then when I was 14, we moved again and went to this comprehensive. And there was a teacher there, John Nettleship, who only had 2 lessons a week. He was my religious studies teacher, and he just was incredibly kind to me and used to really listen to me. I was full of questions that used to drive all the other teachers mad. But he used to say, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll go home and research it. And he did. Every lesson he'd come back, he'd research the answers for me and stuff. And again, he pretty much saved my life at the time. And just those 2 little experiences were the oasis in the desert, really. I needed to keep going, really. So that was one thing. And then the other thing was contact with nature. So when I was 9 and we moved to the countryside, because we'd lived in cities up to that point, my dad's a vicar, and we moved into this huge, ramshackle old vicarage in the countryside. Had 6 acres of land that had gone completely overgrown. And I used to spend as little time in the house as possible. So I just spent all my time out in the trees and, sort of looking in owl pellets and making plaster casts of animal footprints and stuff. And that I didn't know at the time how to really connect with nature. I had nobody to show me. So I was kind of doing it through a sort of natural history kind of approach. So, but that time in the trees, just that the quietness of their embrace, their steadiness, that saved me as well. So yeah, horrible childhood.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Paul. I've felt, I mean, I'm still feeling that emotion of connecting to those teachers. I think I'm very similar in that I credit one teacher for saving my life, and a guy called Bill McQuilkin, who was an ex-army guy, he was a PE teacher, rugby coach, but just a very lovely human being, and always had a bit of time for me. When things were tough, he would just say, do you need a minute? Do you want some space? Because there was no space in boarding school. And I think, I deeply honour Bill, and I still to my day, he's a big part of my inner world.
Yes,
He's my inner coach. He's just got this lovely thing going on, but a lovely guide in many ways. But you referenced also your school, the harshness of the grammar school, and the canes and the system. And as soon as you were explaining that, I just thought it's very clearly modelled on the public school system.
Absolutely, it was. Yeah. And just amazing, just how far just a little bit of kindness can go. Really, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you so much. And as you then, so hearing nature, hearing, these incredible individuals in your life, and also, the neglect at home. And I think, certainly in this world that I work in, boarding in independent schools, it's often the abuse headlines that sort of take a lot of focus, and quite rightly, in that they are incredibly awful things to happen to people. But I think what gets left behind a lot of the time is that neglect, is the abandonment side, or just the day after day of not having your needs met. Just
100%.
the number that does on you as a young person, and the beliefs that you make because of it, really is very, very profound, and lasts as long as until you have your breakdown and do your work.
Which is what happened.
So maybe you could take us through a little bit. So what did you come out into adulthood carrying, and how did that shape things for you?
Well, I mean, I came into adulthood with a lot of complex PTSD, although, I obviously didn't know it at the time. So, that was classic stuff, really. I mean, what I did was I managed to mask it a lot. I put on a very good front. So, I became very bolshy, popular. I could be the life and soul of the party, but the next morning, and seemingly having a fantastic time, and the next morning I would just be crushed for days with existential loneliness again, and a ferocious inner critic. Periods of being very confident, but a lot of it was masking, really, underlying a lot of profound loneliness, really, and like I say, a lot of inner criticism. But I was extremely lucky, and I don't quite understand how this happened. It's like some sort of weird, miraculous thing looking back. When I was only 21. It was the summer I'd just finished university, and my girlfriend at the time said, "Oh, there's a taster psychotherapy weekend on this, an experiential weekend. Do you want to go?" And I literally knew nothing about psychotherapy. And I just thought, oh, I'm not doing anything. Yeah, I'll come along. And it was an encounter group, basically. And I remember the first couple of hours sat with my jaw hanging open, really, because I was watching people actually talking about feelings and being honest, and other people actually listening. And I had literally never experienced that in my life, apart from Mrs. Hibbett and John Nettleship. And to be in a whole group of people doing that, I was like, yeah, this is what I've been missing. This is it. I felt like a fish being put back into water. Really, it was just, I knew this is what I wanted to do. So I just threw myself into therapy, really. And yeah, from the age of 21. And that's what saved me, really. Yeah, so I mean, it was the start of obviously a long, many years of therapy. And for me, because I loved it so much, it became, I mean, for some people, they just need therapy for a few years and, that's it. For me, it became very much a way of life. I mean, I've been in and out of therapy myself most of my life, and obviously work as a therapist and write about therapy and things. So that's kind of how I started to heal, I guess.
Thank you. Yeah, again, feel that emotion when talking about being in that room for the first time where people are truly connecting. And I remember sitting here, 18 months ago, thinking, what would this thing I'm going to do be called? And coming with seen and heard, it was the two things I never felt. I never felt seen. I never felt heard. And then underneath it's making meaningful connections is the sort of strap line, if you want. But that all just came in one go. It was like, okay, and that thing around children, I can't remember. It's sort of an old adage, isn't it? Kind of children should be seen and not heard, or something like that.
Oh yes, of course.
Yeah,
yes,
I think that was in my head, but
yeah.
Very meaningful. And the first time I went into, I'd been in therapy for a long time, but the first time I went into a group environment, I was like, oh my, I could see people modeling vulnerability. I could feel energy between people for the first time, like real connections happening.
Yes.
People making eye contact and seeing someone, like seeing through the veneer, to what was underneath. And it just blew me away. And like you say, that was it. I knew I was home. It had to be work as well as my own journey from then on. But thank you for sharing that. Beautiful. And how did it evolve for you? So did you start to study as a psychotherapist relatively quickly, and then you did your work through your kind of supervision and etc., or how did it go for you?
I think it was probably about 27 before I started formally training in psychotherapy. Leading up to that, I mean, there were a number of very influential things, I think, but one was a place called Lauriston Hall, which it basically was a group of, I think there was 4 of them, hippies in the 1960s, clubbed together and bought this sort of derelict, sort of dilapidated, huge house in southwest Scotland near Dumfries, and formed a commune. Basically, they used to. It's a closed community now, but for many years they used to run lots of residential courses there, and they used to run this thing called Healing Week, which was there'd be about 50, 60 people who'd go to it, and it was. So it was in the 1980s, so it was the height of sort of the radical therapy movement, red therapy, politically aware therapy and stuff. So it attracted just all sorts of people, and it was just this incredible. I mean, I spent a lot of time there over the next 10 years. It was just an amazing melting pot of people running workshops on holotropic breath work, on rebirthing, on catharting, on just everything you can think of. And I just immersed myself in it discussions about therapy and politics, and it was just fantastic. So a lot of that's the place I was kind of forged in many ways, I think. Yeah, that was just an amazing, exciting, experimental, dynamic lifetime. And living together as a community whilst doing it, and having community meetings, resolving conflicts, and having dancing naked together for hours, having saunas, sweat lodges. It was just wonderful. And that's when I first came across shamanism as well at that point. And yeah, prior to that, sort of mentioning shamanism, there's a guy called Daniel Quinn who's written several books that have been hugely influential on my life and my teaching, really. His main book is called Ishmael. It's a conversation with a sentient gorilla who's given a critique of the human race, really. It's not a well-written book, but the ideas in it are really profound. But he wrote another book called Providence. Uzbesky was his short autobiography, looking back over his life. And one of the things he says in it is that essentially it's only as you get older and start looking back over your life that you can see the times where your soul was calling to you and the times where you strayed from the path as well, really. That's certainly been very true for me. One of the times, I had no idea what was happening at the time. My soul was definitely calling to me. So I went to Lancaster University, and as well as the subject you got into study, which I think was sociology for me, you had to choose 2 other subjects to study the first year. And so I was walking around the Great Hall looking at all the different stalls of the different departments, came across religious studies and noticed there was a course on the anthropology of religion. And I genuinely had no idea what anthropology meant. I knew nothing at all about it, but I just felt weirdly drawn to it, signed up for it. I had this fantastic teacher called Paul Heelis. And really what we were studying was, unfortunately, we were using the colonial term primitive cultures, because of course they're not at all primitive. But it was basically studying indigenous cultures. And a lot of them basically were shamanic, animist cultures. And I just knew it spoke to me at a profoundly deep level. I had no idea why. Even when I finished the degree, I thought I'm never going to use that again. It was fascinating, but not realizing the massive impact it would have on me for the rest of my life, because it was my first contact really with animist thinking, really shamanic thinking, and it would be a decade or so later till I really start to realize the impact that it had. So in my mid-30s, I, through a series of events, I had a really complete breakdown. I didn't go psychotic, but I had as bad suicidal depression as it's possible to have. For about 2 years, there were days where I could only promise to not kill myself for 5 more minutes, and then another 5, and so on. Sometimes I could last an hour, sometimes I could promise myself 4 hours. And what happened through that, I felt like I was completely and utterly taken apart. It felt like a nuclear bomb had gone off and reduced everything down to just dust and ash, really, including me. And I very nearly didn't survive that, but I came out of it a profoundly different person, really. I mean, looking back on it, I could see it was some kind of a shamanic initiation in a way. I mean, typically in indigenous cultures, the shaman has to go through a period of death before they can be reborn, really. But that's what it was. And it was at that point, animism and shamanism, I needed to go through that before I actually really started to understand what they're about, really, and how to link it up with my psychotherapy work. Because the shamanic work, we'll come to this later on, I think, the shamanic experience I'd had prior to that, I'd sort of kept a bit at arm's length because of the terrible ethics and abuse of power I saw going on, really. So I kind of was interested in shamanism, but I thought, oh, I'm not quite sure it's for me. But when I came out of that depression, it became the bedrock of my life, really. So
Well, thank you, Paul. Yeah, very moving to hear of your breakdown. I just connected straight to mine. In those days, where you just think, I just can't do it, can't do it anymore. Whatever it is that gets you through those moments, sort of, it's like you're sort of just pulled a little bit, just say, "Oh, just get up, just get up once."
Yeah.
And just go and get the kids. Okay, just do that. If that's all you can do, just go do that. Leave the house long enough to get them. And okay, make them a meal. And it's just 1 inch at a time, isn't it? So,
absolutely.
But as you said, the full taking apart bit, I experienced not quite psychosis, but depersonalization, derealization. I lost who I was, where I was, severe dissociation, dissociative stuff, and then. But in hindsight, looking back now, it was a complete shattering of the facade.
The
ego collapsed in on itself, sort of outer layer stripped away, and I was left naked. And it hurt, and it was horrible. And it was the beginning for me. It was like sort of a coming out of a chrysalis type thing. It was pretty painful. Looking back on it now, thank goodness it happened. But God, it was horrible.
Grim, really grim.
Well, thank you. And you've kind of led us into a nice segue now to look at at, I think probably if we just look at how shamanism started to move into your therapeutic work with psychotherapy, because that's such a big part of why I was so drawn to your writing, and then we can then look at kind of how it created therapeutic shamanism and what that is. Is that okay to just give that link for us, because it would have been percolating with you through your sort of therapy practice quite a lot, I imagine, and then when did it become this clear thing, if you like, therapeutic shamanism?
Right. I wasn't expecting to go into this, but yes, okay. So during my breakdown, I lost my livelihood as well. Badly needed therapy, so I was reliant on NHS services that were pretty appalling with hindsight. And so I spent a couple of years working with this psychodynamic therapist who was, it was good to somebody to talk to each week, but honestly, she was pretty bad. And she was just completely fixated on my childhood. She, and I kept saying to her, look, I've spent years in therapy. I've gone over all this stuff. And her answer was, yes, but you haven't done that with me yet. And, I will fix you. And so I kind of went along with it, but because it was somebody to talk to every week, it was some human contact of some kind. So by this stage, I'd learned to do what are called shamanic journeys, which are basically sort of out-of-body experiences where you sort of travel what are called the shamanic realms. It was through that I started to look much more about, well, this isn't just me, because I can actually see a lot of these patterns in my dad and my mum as well. And I don't know a lot about my grandparents because they died before I was born, but from what I've heard, they were the same. And so I started exploring this and journeying, and it started to really dawn on me just how this was generational trauma in many ways as well. This was a long centuries probably of trauma. My family come from the border region between England and Scotland. The word bereaved, I don't know whether you know this, actually comes from the reavers. And the reavers were basically brigands who were paid variously by the Scots and the English to create havoc on the borders, keep them unstable. So the word bereaved means to have been attacked by the Reivers, basically to have been raped, to have your family killed and things. That's my ancestry. Basically, we were border Reivers for hundreds of years. So a brutal ancestral kind of baggage, burden I was carrying that it just rolled down the generations. I mean, the reason my family was so screwed up was because my dad was so broken by his childhood and, my mum and so on and so on. But I started to kind of look even further and further and further back and do not just shamanic work, but doing lots of reading, like reassessing history, and came across a fantastic book by Steve Taylor called The Fall, and realizing this goes back at least 6,000 years of what laughingly we call civilization, which has been pretty brutal oppression and bloodshed, really, and misery. And as I went further and further and further back, I remember in a shamanic journey coming at a point where it suddenly just all went really peaceful. And I just didn't understand what was going on. And then again, doing more reading and reading Steve Taylor and things, and realizing that the stories were told about our Paleolithic ancestors are wrong. Really, the common narrative that it's Hobbes, Leviathan, he writes, the life of primitive people was nasty, brutish and short, that famous quote. And it's a lie told by the victors, basically. It's a lie colonial cultures tell us about Indigenous people. And actually, in anthropology, it's kind of pretty much what I was taught in the 1970s at university. But in the 1980s and things, people started to reassess the information we had. There's a guy called Boehm, wrote an amazing book called Hierarchy in the Forest, various other people, and they started to realise that Indigenous cultures, I mean, it wasn't paradise. They had their issues and problems. What we don't want to do is go from Hobbes to Rousseau, the myth of the noble savage sort of thing. Both of those are wrong. By any sane measure of a culture, mental health, how they treat the vulnerable and so on, how they relate to the environment around them, for 200,000 years of hunter-gatherer culture, because that's all our ancestors were hunter-gatherers once, 97% of the generations of your ancestors and my ancestors lived as hunter-gatherers and practiced animism and shamanism. And we have lots of accounts from up to the modern era about people like this, the few hunter-gatherer tribes who survived. When they only started really completely dying out in our lifetime in the last 50 years or so. So we actually know what hunter-gatherer tribes were like. And all the accounts of them is that they were better than us, essentially. They were more egalitarian. They treated their children vastly better. They had vastly, vastly better mental health than we tend to as a culture. They lived in right relationship with the environment they lived in. We have no example of a hunter-gatherer culture destroying the environment it lived in. Once we move to civilized cultures, city-state cultures, we have hundreds of examples of city-state cultures that destroyed themselves by destroying the environment they lived in. And look what we're doing now, of course. So the more I started studying this and reading on sort of the anthropologists who were revising the information things, it all started to fit together, really. And one of the things Indigenous people throughout the world talk about, animist cultures talk about, something roughly that translates as something like the original instructions or the original dance, the original templates, the original stories. That basically they were based on a set of instructions about how to live in right relationship with yourself, with other humans, and with the other than human world around you. And it was the essential role of the shaman, essentially, to deeply know the original instructions and to try to keep the culture on track in relation to them. And then we abandon animism, we move to agriculture, we start killing all our shamans, and, excuse me, I don't know if I can swear in here, but it all goes to shit. Leading to, we're now living in the Anthropocene extinction, 6th mass extinction event. The first one ever caused by a species. It's caused by us. Extinction rates are running up between 20 to 200 times, depending who you read, normal levels. We are set to take down anything up to 70, 80, 90% of the other animal and plant species on the planet. And yet we think that we are some kind of more evolved beings than our hunter-gatherer ancestors, that were somehow some pinnacle of evolution and so on. And Indigenous people often, look at our modern culture and say, you're insane. And it's not just a turn of phrase. They mean it. What we call civilization is a mass insanity from an animist perspective. I think from any sane perspective, by any measure of a sane culture, essentially. So basically, it was discovering those original instructions and then understanding what's happened to us as we started to abandon animism, as we start to adopt agriculture, which is a very hierarchical relationship over nature, where we start telling ourselves stories about the myth of human supremacy, that we're somehow the superior species and so on. And then all the from an animist perspective, all the soul loss that this creates in us, the mental health issues, and how psychotherapy can help us with that, because it's evolved basically to try to deal with modern health issues. So that's where it all started to come together, basically. Sorry, I'm rattling on. I'll let you speak.
Not rattling, Paul. I'm gripped. For me, when I started to put the pieces together for myself from your books, you mentioned Steve Taylor, didn't you? I think, and The Fall, and it was the strangest thing. And I think you reference it in either your first or your second book, but it's almost like the moment you hear something, read it, or take it in, and you know it to be true. So I often talk with my clients. There's thinking, feeling, and knowing.
Yeah,
and the knowing level is the it's really deep, and you just know something to be true. It's more than your intuition. And as soon as I read this, I was like, this is the truth. And it's not just my truth. It's not sort of what suits my narrative right now. I knew it to be true, and that's been very, very helpful. And I can see how you putting those pieces together for yourself on your journey then allowed you to bring in effectively this kind of ancient wisdom and template to psychotherapy, which is kind of what we've got now to help us, and sort of started to bring about therapeutic shamanism. So would you mind sort of explaining in your own words what therapeutic shamanism is, and where it sort of the work that birthed it, so maybe the core shamanism and how it fits together?
So you just mentioned core shamanism. So an anthropologist called Michael Harner, who was working in the 1960s, 70s, 80s primarily, he started to realize that you could take a shaman from Peru and sit them down with a shaman from Mongolia with an interpreter, and underneath the sort of different kind of details of their practices, they would absolutely be understanding each other in terms of the deeper levels of the kind of theory and knowledge and stuff. And what he started to realize, that worldwide, animism and shamanism are worldwide, and that there is an extraordinary consistency about them. And he published a book called The Way of the Shaman in 1980, I think it was, where he kind of went into this. And it created a big stir in the anthropology community because people said, well, this can't be true. You can't have cultures that are separated, geographically and through vast periods of time as well, can't have a single coherent body of knowledge. And he said, well, here's all the data. It's true. This is true. And it is true. This is, I mean, you were saying, you knew it was true when you read it. It is ancient knowledge. It's our oldest body of knowledge, and it's what kept us sane for 200,000 years. It was our guiding principles for a long period of time, and everything's gone to shit since we moved away from that, essentially. So he called this core shamanism. Underneath all the sort of cultural trappings and variations, this is the kind of essence of it: core shamanism, core animism as well. And what I realised when I was practicing this and started to explore it more, whilst alongside working as a psychotherapist, is core shamanism existed in cultures where people were connected to nature, where there were healthy adults in the community, where people were living according to the original instructions and so on. And the problem is now we're not. And so when I eventually started trying to teach people shamanism, I realised we're at a very different starting point. You can't just teach shamanic stuff because people might think they can learn it and practice it, but they're not really getting it because they're not connected to nature properly first. There's a whole pile of issues created by the modern era you have to address first, or at least alongside learning shamanism and animism, if you're ever going to really get them. So for me, people kind of think they can learn shamanism just like learning a new topic, like learning geography or photography or something. You can't. You have to, if you're going to, well, you can, but then you just end up practicing some dumbed down plastic bastardized version of it, really. If you want to really get it, there's a massive process of unlearning you have to do. Unlearning the myth of human supremacy. Animism is profoundly non-hierarchical. Humans are not special in animism. It's often described as a spiritual round table. But the extent to which we think hierarchically is so ingrained in our thinking. It takes years to keep realizing bits and stripping out. Think about the times when people talk about raising your vibration, as if higher is better than lower, for instance. Whereas in animism, that's like saying the higher notes of a piano are better than the lower notes, that humans are better above other animals and so on. There's just so much stuff you have to unlearn, so much humility you have to learn. We have to get over our human narcissism, our human arrogance, if we're ever going to reclaim our rightful place in a web of things. It's not a pyramid, it's a web, really. Original shamanism needs to understand we're in very different times now, and it can learn a lot from psychotherapy in terms of how to deal with the modern problems and how to get people to a state where they can actually learn shamanism properly. And I think psychotherapy needs to learn from shamanism, because psychotherapy, for all its wonderfulness, tends to just stay focused on the human. And there are not many therapies that actually look at how to reconnect to the other than human properly to connect. I mean, there's ecotherapy and things, but you're talking about a tiny, tiny percentage of therapy that's sort of eco-based now. So the two together, though, are the two halves of the whole that we need, I think. So, yeah, that's basically what therapeutic shamanism is. Ethics, very important part of it. A lot of the shamanic community is unfortunately profoundly dodgy ethics, unhealthy power dynamics, and so on and so on. Therapy's got a lot to teach us around healthy ethics and power dynamics and so on. So, yeah, that's why therapeutic shamanism is putting those two things together.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much. I think for me, it was so powerful because I love psychotherapy. I love the mind. I love Jung, and I love kind of archetypal psychology, particularly. But what you did in your books was you brought a language um, to something I knew to be true, but I had my own fears about, I guess, what I thought shamanism was. I was very kind of anti woo woo,
Yeah.
because when my mum was very ill when I was young, she went on her own healing journey, and we were off to Glastonbury. We were here, there, and everywhere. We were with everyone who would shake a stick in a wood, and I was put off by it all because I was growing up in a very rigid, authoritarian boarding school. In the weeks and the weekends, and then in the holidays, we were sort of chanting, over here, and suddenly there was no more meat, and we were only eating lentils, and it was homeopathy, and I'm kind of so I rebelled against that for a long time. And I think what therapeutic shamanism did was it brought deep knowing of what was underneath things and explained it in a way that I could connect to in modern times, and as someone who sort of has some understanding of mental health. So thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you for telling me, because it's really good to hear. Because, I mean, much as it's great to see the kind of rebirth of shamanism and the increasing interest in it, I mean, it's, meant to be the fastest growing religion and all that kind of thing. It's not a religion, by the way, but I mean, at the same time, so much of it is woo. It is wrapped up in complete and utter nonsense. And I mean, it might sound strange because here I am a shamanic practitioner, but I'm about as anti-woo as it's possible to be. I mean, it's nothing to do with woo. It's deeply pragmatic and grounded, really.
Thank you. And you touched on that sort of shamanism, fastest growing religion in the UK, or certainly more people were putting it down when they were noting forms and things like that. And there's a lot of myths around it. I mean, the big thing at the moment is plant medicine, psychedelics, etc. Huge explosion there, and it tends to get tied back to shamanism a bit too often. What's your view on that?
The use of plants, hallucinogenic plants in shamanism is actually pretty rare worldwide. There are a few cultures that things like ayahuasca and things that are central to, but the vast majority of shamanic cultures worldwide rarely use plant medicines in that way. So it's, I mean, it's great to see the growth of interest, because people know something's missing and they are looking for it. So ayahuasca can be a sort of way in, I guess, but it's really got very little of anything to do with original shamanism. And I think, a lot of it's just kind of Westerns wanting quick fixes, basically, and drug experiences, and to not have to do the work. And yeah, it's not central to shamanism at all, and it's very unfortunate the way people associate it with shamanism.
Thank you. So there's something. So you touched on we touched on religion. It's not a religion. Shamanism isn't a religion, and then we talked about a little bit about the fall, the last 6,000 years, agriculture, city states. Particularly in UK post-industrial revolution. And the boarding school stuff that I'm involved with, it kind of came out of that real hardening up. Real masculine dominated, patriarchal hardening up against each other, to the world. So you mentioned in your books kind of how you call sky religions came along with the fall. So without going into a big thing about religion, can you just explain that concept of shamanism not being a religion and how what we would call religion kind of came through in that journey?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So, animism. I should probably just say briefly about the relationship with shamanism and animism. Essentially, uh, shamanism is a small part of something much bigger called animism. And animism is basically about living as if we are living in a world that is full of people, only some of whom are human. It's a James Harvey quote, sort of paraphrasing it. Robert Macfarlane, I don't know whether you're aware of his books. He's a really lovely writer. He's written a beautiful book about mountains and one about sort of what he calls the underworld, about caves and lava and stuff. And his latest book, he's really gone much more a sort of animist with it, and it's called "Is a River Alive?" So he asks this question because a lot of people say, oh, of course not, it's just a river. So he asks this question, do you know if a river's dead? And everybody knows that. Everybody can see when a river's dead. So if you know when a river's dead, by definition, you know when a river's alive. Okay. And the thing with animism, for some people, they will actually experience that aliveness. That rivers are actually living beings. For some people, they won't experience that. But what if we lived as if they were? What if we lived treating the world around us as if it's deserving of personhood and respectful relationship? And that's essentially what animism is. It's living as if everything around us is alive, whether you experience that or not. But that means you are going to live in right relationship with it. And so animism is very much a way of being in the world, a way of relating to the world around you. And so it's not a belief system as much as a principles to base your life on. So one of the reasons animism is not usually said to not be a religion is because it doesn't require any leaps of faith or any belief. There's no sacred text. There's no priesthoods. There's no dogmas. There's no heresy in that case either. It's just based on these really fundamental things. What if you lived as if everything around you was deserving of personhood? It's a choice about how to live, essentially. When you start doing that, it starts to change you profoundly. And you generally start to experience the world around you being alive. Because in the modern era, we've just deadened everything. We live in a world that we are dead, we think is dead. And it's not because the world around us is dead, it's because we have just cut off from everything and come up into our heads and our narcissistic little human bubbles, essentially. So it's profoundly different from contemporary religions. Contemporary religions we only start to see emerging over the last 6,000 years, the last 4,000 years really. And they are really profoundly different to animism. They are based on beliefs. They're based on being told what to believe. Animism is based on direct personal experience. Most religions are based on believing what you're told to believe. All of them are hierarchical. Animals are below us, plants below that, stones don't even count. They're not even anything to bother thinking about. They're based on the idea that up is good and down is bad. So in shamanism, animism, we experience three different realms of existence. This middle world, everyday reality, the upper world, what most religions would call heaven or ascended beings, and then the lower world, which is the realm of soul and of nature. And with religions, what we see emerging is a story that animal, plant, stone doesn't matter. And it's a deliberate story because what we're seeing emerging is a culture, what Daniel Quinn calls take culture, that wants to just ravage the land and take everything. And there's no way animists would do that. There is no animist cultures did that ever. So if you're going to get people to do that, you need to tell them a different story. So you need to tell them that we are better than animals. They're just there for us to use. I mean, it literally says that in the Bible, doesn't it? God gave all of this just for us to use as we see fit. So you have to change the stories. And this is the central thing to understand. We are cultural animals, and cultures are made of stories. So animism is a healthy set of stories. Contemporary society is a profoundly unhealthy set of stories. And we have a choice which stories we choose. So when we start to fall, quite deliberately, we start to change the stories. So you are told, it's all about ascension. It's all about God rather than goddess. So the up-down thing, up is good, that's God is good. Down is bad, that's goddess is bad. That means man is good, woman is bad, and so on and so on. We fall into this deeply damaging hierarchical thinking. And all religions, I mean, some are better than others, but that is true to all of them, essentially. They all see humans as closest to God, and they're a pyramid scheme, essentially. And they are also a form of social control, of course. I mean, Church of England's the Tory party at prayer. I mean, that's what they are about, is control and hierarchy and domination, essentially. Of course, there's spirituality wrapped up in there. There's elements of spirituality. I mean, I was brought up, my dad was a vicar, and I spent a lot of my teenage trying to find some spirituality in the Church of England. Used to find little pockets, occasionally a lovely Franciscan monk and things, but a lot of it was basically a version of the Freemasons, really. It was a racket. So, yeah, I'm not a great fan of it.
No, thank you, Paul. I understand, yeah, and thank you for elaborating sort of animism and shamanism. That's really helpful, I think, because you've referenced animism a few times. And I think, given all of what you've said so far, in this sort of fallen world, if you like, and I'm a great believer. I'm an optimist. I'm a great believer. We're on a turning, and I feel that a turning is here. You referenced the sort of the man good, woman goddess bad. We're shifting into a different age of Aquarius. I feel things moving. I can see them moving. I know they're moving. And for me, actually, therapeutic shamanism is a set of tools and templates to help us in that move. That is my personal belief. But what for those who think, okay, what are they on about? What are a few things? What are a few things that therapeutic shamanism can bring to us right now, given the world we're in, and given that we're on this turning point? Hopefully, well, we are. And how can it give us a nudge? What can it bring to our lives?
Well, one of the big things is the original instructions, essentially. Two things. One is it gives us the tools to help us deal with the damage done by the culture we've been raised in. So, how to deal with anxiety and depression and all that kind of thing. And that's more the psychotherapeutic side of it. But Daniel Quinn, actually, towards the end of his book Providence, he said he was giving a talk to a load of Jesuit priests, weirdly, and demolishing religions, sky religions, and so on. And apparently at the end of it, they all came up to him and said, we just know that what you're saying is completely true. And, and you've just destroyed, all the stuff we believed in and things. What do we put in its place? And it was at that point he realized, well, I don't actually know, because he never really kind of into the original instructions. And for those, we have to piece that together from looking at Indigenous cultures that have survived. And for me, the answer is always, with pretty much every question in my personal life and my teaching and everything, is to think, what would the hunter-gatherer answer be here? Not in terms of what they would choose to do, because the actual decision about what to do would have been appropriate to their times and their culture, but in terms of what are the underlying principles that would have informed them, the original instructions. And it's that, really. Without everything's gone wrong since we turned away from those healthy Indigenous original instructions. And what we have to do now is find a way of making those appropriate to the times we live in. But we will only do that by going back to them. I mean, there's that saying, isn't there, that the route to madness is continuing to do the same thing and think you'll get a different result. We've had 6,000 years of sky religions, 6,000 years of hierarchical culture. Look where it's leading us. It's leading us off a cliff. Prior to that, we had nearly 200,000 years of healthy, sane cultures based on these original instructions. Surely the same thing to do is to stop repeating the same mistakes and to look back to those healthy instructions. So, I mean, if you want the answer specifically, sort of come back to your specific work around schools, and do you want me to go into that now?
Yeah, it's schools, or with we have adult support services where we're supporting people to heal from things that have happened to them largely in childhood, and then we've got the work in schools to try and swim upstream and stop that happening, or to improve well-being and welfare. So yeah, I mean, maybe just a few of the things that really cut across for people, where they can, let's start with young people then. So that's within schools and things like that we spoke about before. My passion is to this idea of living in right relationship.
Yeah.
And bringing that into young people's lives alongside a set of skills that enable them to better connect to themselves and to people around them. So things like emotion coaching or breath work or spending time in nature or forest school, and kind of some of these modern things where we can get people a bit closer. So what's your sort of thoughts for young people?
I mean, that's all fantastic. And it is absolutely about fundamentally connecting back to nature. I think the things to consider in doing it is, I mean, I live in North Wales, just 5 minutes walk from a stunningly beautiful beach, and often when I'm out there's people kind of out in this beautiful nature, and they're walking along, talking on their phones, or talking to the person walking next to them, saying, "He said that, and I did that," and things, and they're in their human bubble still. And so, in terms of connecting kids back to nature, we can do it in a kind of outdoor pursuitsy kind of way. But if it's all just about orienteering or abseiling and stuff, I mean, yeah, there's an element of connecting to nature, but you're still doing that in a very human-centric way. That's very different from actually meeting the other than human beings. So if you're going to take it that bit further to meet the other than human beings, it's teaching kids to identify plants and what their uses are, and teaching them how ecologies work, how the redwood trees grow because of the salmon spawn coming upstream and the bears eating them and the bears shit in the woods. So the redwoods depend on the salmon, that kind of thing. Teaching them how ecologies work, teaching them to actually get to kind of know and understand the other than human and the way it all interconnects and how we're meant to be part of that as well. I can't remember who it was, but somebody said, didn't they, that you can't expect people to fight for nature if they don't even know it, if they've got no connection with it. So it's teaching to not just kind of orienteering or absent things, but to fall in love with the beings they meet there, mosses and lichen. And do you get what I'm saying? Yeah. Yeah. And also then in terms of the human relationships, yes, about teaching them about empathy, compassion, listening skills, right kinds of leadership, and so on and so on.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, that, I really connect to those. So something that keeps coming up is just to, without going too much into the principles of therapeutic shamanism, but the idea of soul loss and power loss, they were transformative for me because I could suddenly understand what had happened. And when you mention nature there and understanding ecologies and connectedness, I kind of go to the power loss bit in my head. So could you just sort of top line those for us?
Yeah. So shamans say that there are two fundamental ways we get ill: soul loss and power loss. Soul loss is basically where we lose parts of us or send parts of our true self away. And so, I mean, that can happen in all sorts of ways. Say you kind of fall deeply in love, and a lot of people's idea of love is they sort of entangle themselves with the other person. So when that person dies or betrays them or something, it feels like part of, you was died in the process. People often say when somebody's died or somebody's betrayed them, it's like they've just sort of ripped my heart out or left a hole in me. So you can get soul loss through all sorts of ways that Indigenous people would have suffered from as well. Now, in Indigenous cultures, soul loss was understood. It would have been identified immediately, and it was considered so dangerous that it would have been dealt with immediately by the whole tribe if need be. And what would happen was the shaman basically would do shamanic work, try to find the lost soul part and try to return it back to the person. And it's regarded as dangerous because it leaves holes in us. It kind of weakens us, if you like, and then other things can get in. If you read the symptoms of soul loss, it's like reading a description of Western culture. Depression, anxiety, apathy, procrastination, sense of something missing in your life, feeling there's a hole and trying to fill it through drugs or handbags, consumer. It's just Western culture is suffering profound endemic. It's a pandemic of soul loss. I've not met a single Westerner who hasn't got profound soul loss in this culture. And that means we're vulnerable for other things getting in. Now, one of the things that can get into us are unhealthy thought forms. So, feeling a sense of loss in your life, of emptiness, vote for me. I'll make you feel better. That's what politicians do. Feeling a sense of loss in your life, blame the immigrants. Blame the homosexuals. Buy this handbag, buy this car. Our modern culture wants to keep us in a state of soul loss to sell us stuff. If anyone listening to this isn't familiar with Wetiko, Wetiko, have a Google. It's very enlightening, really. So that's what soul loss is. Power loss is the other way we end up with holes in us, and that's basically being disconnected from nature. So it's not a great analogy, but you think about the difference in your little mobile phone battery, that amount of power, and plugging your phone into the national grid. What we've done as humans is we've unplugged ourselves from the wider than human community and fallen into our little human bubbles, and it's weakened us. And shamans really understood that for us to be healthy, we have to be part of something bigger. We have to be part of an ecosystem. We cannot be healthy and whole. It's like an organ in the body declaring its independence, like the liver saying, "That's it, I'm off. I'm superior to the rest of you. It's like it's nonsensical. It's going to kill the liver. It's going to kill the rest of the body, and that's exactly what we're doing. Is we've declared our independence, and it's made us weak, and it's killing the world around us. That's why the world is burning. Essentially.
Really helpful. I think with the soul loss part. I mean, when I started doing practice emotional freedom technique and matrix reimprinting, and matrix reimprinting particularly is a sort of a modern take on soul loss or inner child work, internal family systems, family constellations, all these wonderful sort of psychotherapeutic ways of connecting into our younger selves or connecting into family group structures and things like that. Ultimately, there is a going back, a recognizing that something went missing, recognizing what that part was and what it meant to you, and then bringing it home. And when you bring it home, it's like you just level up. In modern terms, you sort of feel a little bit come back, a bit more spring in your step, a bit less fear, or some sadness moves, or it's a really amazing thing. And the sort of bringing those soul parts back and then connecting to nature. It's why people have these retreats are done in the woods. And my children were off on a bushcraft residential this week. They were thinking about how would things play out with their friends and dynamics, and that there was no phones allowed, and this was great. And they said, will it be okay? I said, basically, if you put young human beings into nature in the woods, I said all of that stuff at school will just disappear. Within a few hours, it will melt away, and this will just be just be connected. And if something doesn't feel right, just go and spend some time with a tree. Go and spend some time just and breathe. And I said it'll all be okay. And they came back and they had the time of their lives. They said, "Oh, none of that school stuff mattered anymore. It was all gone."
Yeah, absolutely.
So, they're plugging back into that source of the power.
Yeah.
Mm.
Thing I forgot to I'd just like to add about soul loss is although Indigenous people would have suffered soul loss through things like bereavements and things, the biggest way I've found in modern day culture people suffer soul loss is because they sent parts of themselves away to fit in and try to survive dysfunctional families, school systems, jobs that no human being should have to spend their lives doing, and so on and so on. So we live in a profoundly domesticated culture. I mean, we think we're very clever as human beings for having domesticated other animals and plants, but there's nothing on the planet we've domesticated more than ourselves. We've completely dumbed ourselves down, and to do that, to fit into one-day culture, we've had to send so many parts of us away. Compare that to Indigenous cultures who were literally designed to prevent soul loss. But not only that, to help each person's soul blossom and grow. So in the Huna shamanic tradition in Hawaii, when a child was born, an elder would be appointed to watch that child for a year. And then after a year, all the tribe would be called, and that adult would say what they had seen of that child's soul and how the whole tribe and community could help it blossom. Now, imagine living in a culture like that and compare that to modern day schooling. That's not the principle that modern day schooling is based on.
No, it's so fragmented and it's so attainment focused. It's so left brain focused. It's IQ and above all else. Thank you for that. That's a beautiful illustration of it. Yeah, there's something I wanted to make sure we had a little bit of time for, and I know we're running out here today because there's so much to explore. But this sort of lot of power loss, and your second book, Rewilding Yourself. The three books: the Shamanic Journey, the first one, Rewilding Yourself, and then Finding Your Deeper Soul, as well as the courses, online courses that you offer around this, Introduction to Therapeutic Shamanism, etc. We'll put all the links of these in the show notes today.
Thank you.
How do you? So just across those three books, then, and particularly the rewilding yourself, which was something we were sort of just touching on there. How do you lay out this path, this blueprint, this template for people across the books?
Yeah, so the first book is to introduce people basically to how to do shamanic journeys, because it honestly is something most people can learn. It's weirdly not that difficult. And also to put it in the context of the fall and our domestication things, so that people can kind of understand what it is we're really trying to get back to, the original instructions and the original shamanic practices, essentially, not the kind of sort of modern day bizarre versions of them. And then the second book is basically an exploration of what's called lower world journeying, which is really about how to connect more profoundly to nature, to the other than human, to other animals, to plants, but really crucially to actually how to connect back to your original blueprint, your actual true soul. One of the things that's really happened, going back to religions, actually, religions in shamanism, we talk about the difference between soul and spirit. Spirit is more of the upper world, I mean heaven, if you like, and it's a set of more abstract, personalized principles like compassion, empathy, tolerance, all that kind of thing. And it has its place, absolutely. But your soul is the individual thing that you were meant to be. Your uniqueness, your true self, essentially. And the upper world is spiritual in terms of everything is just oneness there, really. The lower world is also oneness, but it's oneness through ecology. It's through everything is meant to, it's like everything is meant to be a point on the spider's web. And if that thing isn't there, then the web is weak. So amazing book, Soulcraft by Bill Plotkin. I can remember reading this years ago, and I was lying down reading it. I literally sat up, bolt upright, when I read this line. He said, "The world cannot be whole until you take your place in it." And it really hit me then that this kind of thinking, oh God, life's too hard, or I'm just going to concentrate on my own spiritual evolution and evolve and renounce the world and things. It's not just you that suffers, it's the world. And we are harming the world in doing this. So an animist understood this. So finding your soul is not just for you, it's for the world. It's for you to take your place in the world and to be of service as you're meant to be the organ in the larger body that you were meant to be. And so the second book is about that practice, essentially, and the qualities of actually what that really is, which is about understanding what an actual adult is, which is something we haven't really managed to get onto. Because we do not live in a world of adults at the moment. We live in a world of children in adults' bodies. We are far away from being adult in this culture. And so that's what the second book is exploring, how to connect to the other than human, but also how to become the adult you were meant to be. And then the third book is to take that more into deeper, really looking at how healthy human cultures would work as well. What actually are the original instructions for healthy tribe, essentially, for healthy communities. What healthy elders are, because healthy elders are extremely few and far between in this culture too. So that's what the first three books are about. And then the fourth book's coming, which will be exploring the upper world and animist spirituality more as well. So
Amazing. Well, I'm looking forward to that one, Paul. I've the first two books I consumed hungrily, and then kindly read a part of the third book for some recent stuff. And for me, the journeying, you say it's pretty easy, and I found it helped that I've been meditating for a while. because there is a hollowing out process, or a sort of a getting away from your day-to-day stuff up here. You kind of left brainy middle worldy stuff. But other than that, just go. And because everything that's within us is hundreds of thousands of years old, and it just takes us off. And it's there for everybody. And I think I would encourage anyone to have a look into it and to see if it works for them. For me, it brought emotion when you said to take your part in the greater whole, because I've noticed that as I've done more journeys, done more personal work in general, but more therapy, etc., but more journeys, I bring things back that become gifts for my children, my partner, my work that I'm doing here, and it just goes and it goes out again, and it all just sits on top of each other, and we sort of get taller as a group each time.
Yes,
and it is beautiful. And there was just, I wanted to finish today with the thing that you referenced, which was I had 3 or 4 sit-up moments with your books. Although I didn't have a book, I was listening to them. I had that oh my god moment. I think I laughed out loud more at something you wrote in one of your books than I'd done at any sort of film I'd seen recently or anything like that, which was talking about the power of guides. And I think you said something, I'm paraphrasing, something along the lines of they're not parking space fairies or something like that. That they're not going to suddenly come up and kind of fix your little day-to-day bits and bobs. And I'm just like, it really went straight in there. I laughed a lot. But the sort of 20 qualities, I've written it here, 20 qualities that distinguish psychologically and emotionally mature adult. But the 20 things that make an adult or a functional adult. I read through those, and it's hilarious. It was upsetting because I realized how few I was, how few the people around me were, and then I looked at the wider world, and I went, Jesus, sort of, we're scoring like a 1 out of 20 here occasionally. So, I think there's something really powerful in that. Could you just tell us a little bit about those qualities and how you work them through?
Yeah, I mean, people sometimes ask where they come from, and two main answers really is people sometimes think that hunter-gatherer culture sort of, because we talk about the Neolithic revolution, which happened around about 11,000 BC when we started to adopt agriculture. That only happened in one part of the world, and it kind of spread out. So there were original, authentic hunter-gatherer cultures. I don't mean indigenous cultures that were animal herding and things. I mean actual hunter-gatherer culture surviving until quite recently. One thing we know about hunter-gatherer cultures is they didn't tend to change very much. So the ones that survived recently have probably been like that for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years, really. So we know what hunter-gatherers were like. We have a lot of accounts from anthropology, from missionaries, all sorts of people. We do understand what hunter-gatherers were like. And the descriptions we have of the adults, that's where these 20 things come from, essentially. They're incredibly consistent. Anthropologists talking about people in Borneo compared to missionaries talking about people from Guatemala, hunter-gatherers. They're incredibly consistent. And I think the other thing that's really interesting is if you look at humanistic psychotherapy and depth psychology, so humanistic psychotherapy, people like Carl Rogers, Abraham Maslow, obviously Carl Jung with depth psychology, when you look at what they've found happen to people who really stay the course of therapy and really do the work, the description is remarkably similar to the descriptions of healthy hunter-gatherer adults. The one thing that's missing from the people that just done psychotherapy is the connection with the other than human, essentially. But so we know this stuff is old, and we know that it's deep in us because therapy, when we strip the layers away, it's there. You can learn how to be a proper adult. But it includes things like being emotionally comfortable with feelings and emotions, not ruled by them, but not repressing them either, being able to be vulnerable, to be able to talk about feelings. With hunter-gatherers were just very emotionally comfortable people. anthropologists said they'd just never been around people that laughed so heartily and could grieve so fully, and so on and so on. They were very embodied. Most people aren't at all in their bodies, they're in their heads. They were very reality orientated. They didn't believe in mad religious stories. They didn't believe in conspiracy theories and so on. They didn't retreat into fantasies as a way of escaping things. They were very one of the things I love about shamanism is it's extremely pragmatic and down to earth. It's not woo at all. They use their own power wisely, including seeking to empower other people, never seeking to have power over others. They took full responsibility for their own choices and actions and owned their mistakes. They were ethical, honourable. They sought to enhance community. They were highly inclusive of diversity. Most hunter-gatherer cultures recognise 5 different genders or more. They were absolutely tolerant of people's sexual preferences and so on. They were people who acted for the greater good, not just for personal gain. They redistributed wealth. They lived with equality. And crucially as well, when they were making decisions, they would always think about, how will this affect my children's the 7 generations after me? We don't even think about our children, our grandchildren a lot of the time in making decisions in the way we're trashing the planet. So we are literally living in a culture of rampaging children in adults' bodies at the moment. And most people have no idea what an actual healthy adult is like. And so again, there's a process of learning the template, what actually is a healthy adult like. And that goes back, this is what one of the things the original instructions can give us, essentially.
Thank you, Paul. And with your permission, I'm going to provide a link when this podcast goes out to the 20 qualities as well as your books. I mean, for me, it's the template for doing personal work, for sort of living by every day. When I take a read of them, I think, how am I? I'm just being honest. Like, out of 10, where am I on that? Like 3 out of 10. Okay, well that's cool. It's better than 0. But there's work to do, and we just try something. Okay, how can I be more authentic? How can I lift others up rather than, bring them down? If I'm looking down on someone or looking up on someone, just rebalance. Okay, done a little bit today on that. So I want to thank you for those, because we're going to use them in some work we're doing soon. With schools, with business leaders, and things like that. I think they're very, very powerful.
Wonderful.
Yeah, just it's for me, this is ancient wisdom kind of made usable, useful, and practical in the world we're now in. Because you say that the shamanism that would have been practiced hundreds of thousands of years ago, they weren't dealing with some of the stuff that we're dealing with now. It's the level of soul loss, the level of power loss. We've got some work to do, but I do believe what you've brought to us is a gift, and I want to thank you for taking the time today, bringing us through some of the kind of key elements, your own journey. And I want to thank you personally, because your work has changed my life. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Chris. It's been an honour and a pleasure. And I'm so in admiration of the work you're doing as well. Really, it's profoundly needed, and the way you're getting that out there as well.
Thank you. Well, thank you for today, Paul Francis, and thank you so much to everybody for listening or watching. Information around Paul's work and where you can find out a little bit more will be in the show notes. But other than that, I think some of the principles that were talked about today, just getting back into nature and to noticing those parts of ourselves that we might have sent away, and whether it's through therapy, through working in groups, spending time in nature, or exploring Paul's work, or whatever it is, that will bring us to a better place as people and as a civilization. So thank you for that, and go well with your day, and hope to see you again soon. But thank you, Paul.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
Okay, bye.